Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fiscal Fridays. Let me ask you a question. Is Idaho's bureaucracy really accountable to the people? Those in the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare sure think they aren't. A third-party audit dropped this week revealing that, among other things, IDHW misspent and overspent public dollars while favoring certain groups and blatantly ignoring directives from the legislature. But this also leaves us with some questions. What exactly did the audit reveal about the inner workings of the IDHW? How does this affect Idaho taxpayers? And what should be done about this egregious behavior? So what exactly happened in the IDHW? To understand this issue, you must rewind to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. At that time, the federal government injected billions of dollars into states to address learning loss from school closures. The Idaho Legislature agreed to take a total of $66 million of this funding to support so-called community partners. These groups would provide additional educational support to school-aged children between the ages of 5 and 13. These education providers will receive funds proportionate to their reach in the GEM state. However, legislators started to notice something wasn't quite right within the program. The conservative Republican from Twin Falls, Senator Glenita Zeiderveld, blew the whistle on her concerns that these grants were being used to fund unauthorized programs. Her focus was specifically directed at the use of funds to inappropriately subsidize preschool programs after the legislature just rejected a different $6 million proposal that would have done the same thing. In response to the allegations of wrongdoing, the legislature included language requiring independent audit of the program. The audit of the program reveals that the IDHW has no regard for the law and the say of the constituents in the way they do business. The audit disclosed 8 findings that detail how the money was mismanaged and overspent. If you would like to read this report in more detail, you can find the link in the video description below. But here's a summary of the fiscal implications of this report. The IDHW lacked many of the procedures and documentation that is typically required of parties applying for grants. In fact, the audit found that none of the grant applications submitted had adequate documentation to support their approval. Worse, however, was the department's lack of adherence to the statutory requirements of the program. This led to a cascade of other issues within the program as well. About 30% of applicants in each phase of the program planned to use the money for programs that didn't serve the 5 to 13-year-old children age group that was defined in the legislation. This included spending on preschool programs and even for adults up to the age of 24 in some cases. We also saw that more than half of the recipients in each phase of the program proposed budgets that included funds for ineligible expenses. This included rental assistance, playground equipment, computers, cameras, and even drones. In all, this equates to about $3.9 million lost to ineligible expenses. A particularly egregious component of the report was how IDHW ignored funding limits imposed by the legislature. About 44% of all the spending in the program went to only 4 organizations that applied multiple times using different programs within their ranks. Some of the biggest winners in this scheme were the University of Idaho and the Idaho Association for the Education of Young Children, an organization that is particularly known for promoting Marxist ideology. In all, these 4 organizations received $22 million more than what they were entitled to. As a group, they received more than 4 times what the law would allow. All these issues with documentation and reckless spending combined to put the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare nearly $500,000 over budget. So what does this mean for Idahoans, and what can be done to fix it? Some of IDHW's responses to the audit are telling. The department brazenly claimed that the $36 million budget was optional because the bill didn't include the word only in it. Part of the problem is that this is not how legislative budgets work. The legislature appropriated a total of $36 million for the first year of the program. But to be frank, this seems to be how the department views all their budgets. Suggestions. I guess that explains the $500 million in supplementals they received last fiscal year, too. With such a response, it is obvious that this is ingrained in the culture of Governor Brad Little's executive branch. It goes to show the bureaucracy in Idaho is no different than that in Marxist havens like California. For taxpayers, this means that the government will tax and spend while you get no say in the matter, even through a representative system with supposed checks and balances on power. The director of the IDHW, Dave Jepson, and those connected with the Community Partnership Grants Program should be fired and investigated for the egregious misuse of public funds. Additionally, those on the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee should be intentional about cutting the agency's budget to shrink the power amassed. In sum, the department is guilty of overspending and misallocating funds to benefit the objectives of their department rather than what our elected officials decided was prudent. Be it malicious or negligent, the IDHW should face serious consequences from the legislature and the governor for their abuse of funds. Taxpayers have a stake in this issue too, and they should not allow the bureaucracy to run over the law. If you enjoy this show, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel to keep Idaho Freedom content in your newsfeed. For more episodes of Fiscal Fridays or other great content from the Idaho Freedom Foundation, please visit idahofreedom.org.